Was turning water into wine Jesus' first miracle? That's what we're going to talk about today in John 2. This chapter goes from a joyful celebration to a righteous anger, from a wedding in Cana to a confrontation at the temple. Hi, this is Jill from the Northwoods, talking about the Bible one small step at a time. We're just going through the overview. We're looking at what the chapter means. A little bit of history, a little bit of meaning and theology in this, but people. The Bible is about real people, and that's what we're really talking about. So, Jesus' first sign in John is the wedding at Cana. John being very specific about the time. You'll notice that he opens up the third day, meaning 3 days after the previous events in chapter 1, where Jesus began his calling, and then the events of chapter 2. He is going through this step by step. Now we're in Cana of Galilee. This is very close to the small town of Capernaum where he's at. There's some archaeological finds recently that kind of confirm the location. There's always been a little bit of a mystery. These are old towns, they're small towns, and maybe we didn't always document exactly where they were. But it's fascinating how these layers of history keep unfolding. So Jesus and his mother are invited to a wedding along with his disciples. The wine runs out. It's an embarrassing situation in a culture of hospitality where treating your guest was sacred, and running out of wine would have been a social disaster for this family, too. Mary, confident in who Jesus is, turns to him, asks him to do something about it. And he replies, "Woman, what does this have to do with me? My hour has not yet come," meaning the hour for him think to come out in his ministry and start doing miracles. Now, this sounds harsh. And in terms of the word woman, it's not disrespectful. It's more like madam, ma'am. He's not, it's a formal, respectful address in this culture. And the tone matters. I noticed that some audio Bibles I listen to, anytime someone reads something to you, whether it's a TV show or a movie or an audiobook, there is an interpretation there. So sometimes I've heard it and it's like, woman, you know, and that's not what I know he means right here. He does not talk to people like that. And so I don't think that that is the case. So just keep in mind that anytime you see something, there is an interpretation in it. I have my own. I sort of see it as a twinkle of humor between mother and son, but I also look at things a little bit on the rosy side of things. So that's my bias when I read things. And Mary knows. Mary knows he's going to do it. You get this idea in The Chosen. She sort of gets a gleam in her eye and smiles, and she says to the servants, "Do whatever he tells you." It's a way that she sees he is willing to help. Maybe the way he said it, what he sees in her eyes, or just the fact that she knows her son. She knows he's about to do something about this situation. And this may be our first lesson of persistence, that Mary knows, she trusts in her son, and she knows he's going to do it. But then again, she had an angelic announcement, prophetic words. She knows who he is. And now Jesus instructs the servants to go and fill 6 large stone jars. These jars were used for ritual purification. They held about 20 to 30 gallons each, meaning that this miracle produced probably 120 to 180 gallons of wine. Symbolically, this is huge. And so think about it this way: something ceremonial became joyful. This is new wine, right? We're going to talk later, and we've talked about before, new wine doesn't fit in old wineskins. Something new is happening here. We are about to celebrate joyfulness instead of obligation. And why the number 6? In Judaism, 7 means completeness. 6 sometimes suggests incompleteness. And until, like in this case, Jesus steps in and makes it complete. Or was there literally just 6 jars? Maybe both. I have total faith that we can have a philosophical, deep discussion about it with Jesus, and at the same time, it being a physical thing. I think both are always true. And so when the wine is served, the guests are amazed, because usually the best wine is served at the very front, because everyone's pretty sober at that point and can taste the wine. As they have more and more wine, they lose their discernment. They learn their ability to judge how good the wine is. And so the cheap stuff usually comes later. But now the good stuff comes in. So not only did he make 120 to 180 gallons of wine, he made delicious wine. And so that's it. Jesus is joyful, he's abundant, and everything he does is in excellence. And this, John tells us, is the first sign, not a miracle. He doesn't use the word miracle. John uses this word intentionally. Signs point to a deeper truth. They point to who Jesus really is. And why wine? Why is this the first sign? It's because God isn't just about solemn rituals, isn't just about silent reverence. He's the God of joy, of marriage, of celebration, all the things that are happening here within God's will. And this sign also hints at something new. It reminds me we're about to have not new rituals, not new laws, but a living relationship with joy and celebration. And it's foreshadowing because the next time wine takes the center stage in a story, he's talking about his blood and he is about to give his blood for all of us. So the symbolism here, I think, is powerful. We're going to have joyful blood and we're going to have sorrowful but repentful blood. So then Jesus cleans the temple. We jump next to Jerusalem. It's time of Passover, not the final time, but this is going to be an earlier festival. Again, Jerusalem swells to double the population. Merchants are there, they're selling things, and the money changers are exchanging Roman currency to temple shekels. They weren't just providing a service, they were exploiting pilgrims. And not only that, the people who were selling the animals, you have to make a sacrifice when it comes to the temple. In this particular case, they just weren't, oh, here, pilgrim, here's an animal. I will sell it to you at cost because I know how important it is that you make this pilgrimage here. They were making a profit. Chances are, we don't know, the temple structure was also profiting from this exchange. They built an area which was in this area of the Gentiles in the temple court that was meant for people to come in who weren't necessarily Jewish to be able to sell things. And so, what does Jesus do? He makes whip of cords and then drives them out. This is so harsh. And we think of this as something that seems out of tune with what we've seen from Jesus. Kind words, thoughtful words, challenging people with thoughts. But here he's saying, stop turning my father's house into a marketplace. This is important. The disciples remember a quote from Psalm 69:9: zeal for your house will consume me. It wasn't anger for his own sake. It was zeal. It was emotional strength. This is supposed to be God's dwelling, a place of worship. And it's come into a profit center, a market, a Disney World. And they just did this in The Chosen, and tears were in Jesus' eyes. This Jerusalem in general, he weeps over, he considers a lot. This was supposed to be the place of where people come to worship God, think of God, dwell on God, and instead look what it's become. One temple was destroyed, another was raised up. And so this is the temple, the second temple. And the religious leaders demand a sign. And Jesus says, destroy this temple and it will raise again in 3 days. He's not talking about the building. But they scoff. It took us 46 years to build this building. And John tells us right outright. He's speaking about the temple of his body, that he is not talking about destroying this temple. They're going to bring that accusation to his court trial because they're saying, oh, he says he's going to tear down the temple. They knew what he meant because they knew that if you buried his body, it was going to be resurrected in 3 days. And that's why they put out guards. So they knew better, but they try to make him look what he's saying, that kind of thing. So later at his trial, the statement was misquoted. It's also a statement that shifts from buildings to bodies. The physical temple the indwelling that people believed in. We had the tabernacle in Egypt. We had tents and they brought the ark forth. Then the ark lived in various places. David wanted to build a temple. God said no. Solomon built it. The idea of this being the place of the ark. And instead, now we're talking instead about spirits of believer. Now, instead, we're talking about the spirit of believing. We're not talking about a physical being. I don't go to the temple to pray. I didn't even go to the temple to pray when I was there because I was an atheist, but we don't have to anymore. He dwells with us. He's with us all the time, no longer about buildings. The crowd believes, and Jesus knows the heart. So many people did believe in Jesus because of the signs he performed in Jerusalem. He healed people, he drove out demons. But John adds something kind of sobering here. Jesus did not entrust himself to them, for he knew the people and he knew what was in man. He knows the heart. This is haunting. He sees through the surface level enthusiasm. You may go to the temple and you may put on a good show, but I know what you're thinking and I know what's in your heart. Obviously, some people go with a genuine faith, genuine pleading to God, genuine trust and celebration and thankfulness to God. Not everyone. He is not interested in being a spectacle. He knows those who are truly seeking truth and those who are just following the fireworks. This idea of joy, zeal, reverence, boy, that's what I'm meditating on this week. God cares about our joy. He delights in the weddings and in the celebrations and in communities. He didn't grumble about this, he enhanced it. And he cares about holiness too. The holiness of the temple had been corrupted. And now Jesus took action. We are temples of God because God dwells in us. Are we staying holy or are we turning ourselves into a marketplace, so to speak? That kind of idea. But I'm going to be meditating on that. And what I'm going to be praying about is that God's church doesn't become a marketplace, doesn't become Disney World, doesn't become something that turns into an exploit of what it's supposed to be. I worry about that because it almost feels like everything is, right? Everything we do nowadays has to be a show, has to be a big pronouncement. Even people who are political, I have to make a big show for TikTok so that it makes a clip on the news. Instead, we should be focusing on the things that matter and not turning things into a show. And what I'm going to share with others is the idea of God's joy, his wanting us to have that joy, that celebration. I think people look at God sometimes when they don't know him as sour, as stern, as that what they call him, the pasty Jewish man in the robe who is so above all of this that he is not a human being. I think in the end that's why I like The Chosen so much. It shows a real man that laughs, that smiles, that makes jokes. Obviously we don't know, but I like that image of God, and I want people to know God can be stern. He can say tough messages. He can do tough things like what he did in the temple court, this chapter. But he is a God of joy, celebration. And I think that's just the greatest. Thanks so much for watching. I appreciate everyone who's here. Please remember that I have this in podcast form and on YouTube. If you have anything to say to me, you can email me at jill@startwithsmallsteps.com, or you can put a comment in the chat channel. I'm fairly new at YouTube. I'm getting the hang of it, and I'll get better at it too, I'm sure. So thanks so much. I appreciate your prayers. Have a great day.